Africa is the world's youngest continent in terms of population age. About 60% of its population is under 25 years old. That's according to UN data. But young people are struggling to find work, and that's been fueling some anti-government protests. Is this a moment of reckoning, and what can be done? Now, in 2023, 53 million African youth were either out of work, out of school, or out of training programs. More than 10 million young people are entering the workforce every year, competing for just 3 million jobs, says the World Bank. Now, the International Monetary Fund projects that in 5 years, half of those joining the global labor force will come from African countries. So there's an urgent need to create up to 15 million jobs annually. The anti-government protests in Kenya that have turned deadly have seen the youth taking to the streets to protest against economic hardship, the lack of jobs, poor governance, and alleged extrajudicial killings and abductions by security forces. The Pan-African pollster Afrobarometer estimates that up to 800,000 young people enter the job market each year. And even though Gen Z, who are between 13 and 28 years old, are more educated than their elders, they're also more likely to be unemployed.
They told us, go to school, education is the key, they said. We sat in classes with no windows. We studied in torn uniform on empty stomachs. We believed them. Our parents believed them too. They gave everything. Sold cows, missed meals, broke their back just to see us wear that gown. And years later, here I am, graduated, jobless, hopeless.
So while campaigning, Kenya's President William Ruto pledged to create 4 million jobs. He insists that he's on course to tackle youth unemployment and growing ill-feeling.
On matters unemployment, it cannot be sorted out in one day. It was never sorted out by the previous administrations. I am working on it now. That is why we have 320,000 young people working in our affordable housing. That is why we have 200,000 young people working in our digital jobs framework. And that is why we have 400,000 young people working outside Kenya today. Because for the first time, we have a plan on sorting out the challenge of unemployment.
All right, let's hear more from Kennedy Odede. He's the founder and CEO of Shining Hope for Communities, that's SHOFCO. He joins me from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Let's go straight into what the youth unemployment situation looks like where you work, and just what's the impact on the people and the country.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we've been facing a lot of challenges. Usually the youth are feeling left out and they are angry. As you can tell, there have been a lot of youth going outside to fighting for their rights, and it's high time we have to listen to them. Right now, as you know, in Kenya, 75% of the populations are under the age of 35. That's really powerful, you know, and they're kind of the majority. And they are feeling they're not part of the cake, right? So what has happened that there's no jobs, you know, jobs have been difficult for them. And as I work in mostly informal settlement slums here in the country, I can feel the heat on the ground. And there is no jobs, people are struggling, and they are having they are feeling that they want to be part of the success. And they're also not feeling part of the leadership. So that's the big thing happening now.
And so would I be right in saying that we are seeing the leadership, the people in power, take advantage of that situation and maybe use these unemployed youth for their own gain? I'm talking about the goons that we've seen infiltrate the protests in Kenya, for instance.
Just to be clear to you also, I was someone who grew up in a slum, in poverty. And I remember in my younger days, I did not care about anything. What happened is that when you have no hope, you have nowhere to go to, you don't really care about dying, because the idea is that you gave up in life, right? And then it's also easier for you to be used, right, by other factions, okay? So what we're seeing in Kenya, but just to be clear again, in Kenya, something's happening in Kenya unique. We're also seeing youth from the middle class also coming out, and the youths who are unemployed from the informal settlement. So this for me the first time I've seen this in my life, right? Most of the time before, I remember only the youth from Islam going out. This time, even the middle class youth. So we are in a very tough situation in the country. And what they're looking for, I think they want to be listened to. They want to be given opportunity, right? Otherwise, it's a time bomb, as we're saying it.
Indeed, a ticking time bomb. One would say it has actually exploded already or is exploding. You said they're angry. You said they're hopeless. But, sir, it's not just a Kenyan problem. It's an African problem. In fact, call it a global problem. So what have you seen work from around the world, from the African continent, when it comes to closing the job gaps?
So the challenge that the African youth are facing is that their leaders are living luxurious life. The kind of watch they wear, the kind of clothes they wear, and yet they talk about high taxes. They talk about there's no money, the economy is tough, And then when the youth people look at you and now the social media, they can check what you're wearing and where you are living and a kind of luxury life. That is the problem, So they are feeling left out. They are feeling that people are taking advantage of them. Leaders are just there for themselves, right? And I saw this during COVID, and I knew that because of COVID, things were also going to be much more tough, right? And then we are also working with the youth. Right now, what we're doing as Shofco is that we are trying to change, right? The job that are done 20 years ago, 10 years ago, no longer works now. How do we work with our youth with a new trend, right? The power of technology. How can we get jobs, right? If you go to Tibet, for example, they are still having old schools way of training, right? So the African leadership has to understand that the world is changing, and this is the young population. And this idea that we have gold, we have silver. No, the Africa's great resource is the youth that we are having. And if we don't really invest on this youth, we are going to see what's happening in Kenya, in other countries. It's going to happen.
Right.
So I think it's high time for government to listen to them.
Indeed. But the question is, how do we create these jobs, sir? Which is what I'm asking. What's working, if indeed anything is working, in terms of creating jobs for the youth? How do we create these jobs for the youth?
Okay. Well, the way to create the first of all, Africa, as you know, as Kenya, for example, there's a lot of a creative economy, right? So what the youth are wanting, and how can we invest into their ideas, right? How can we invest? How can we bring in government policies that enable these young people to start their own jobs, right? Now they're crying that taxes are high, even if they start jobs, right? And then we in Kenya here, we have a lot of things happening. We have blue economy. What are the ways that we can able to create this? So in a small way, what we're doing now in my organization, we are able to look for funding to give youth the loans, right? So and train them and prepare them to run their own businesses, And let's not forget the informal economy. That's big thing. And I think most of the time we are forgetting that informal economy. And that's where most of the youth are. So if we can invest in that, if we can also invest in production, manufacturing, we have to change that way of thinking. Africa must start producing. We are giving our jobs away. I won't say which countries, but we have to start building jobs in our own countries. And the government has that power to do that and invest.
Indeed. And so countries like China and India, they managed to drive job-centered economic growth by outsourcing tens of millions of jobs and production from developed countries. So how can this be replicated? In fact, can it be replicated on the continent, and how?
I think you heard our president, President Ruto says that Kenya speaks the best English, It's true, it's not lying. Kenya really good. But I think there's no one really thinking, for this youth. Because we can do that. No, look at Kenya, right? Africa is doing so well. We can do that. Right now, people are going to China and India, right? There's a lot of work that be done. Technology, we are not really investing into that. So I think it's possible if African leadership take it serious on the youth.
Right, but then you mentioned technology, and I'm thinking about AI, artificial intelligence, which is actually wiping out some entry-level positions. So just how do you think this is going to affect African job seekers, and where are the opportunities? Again, I ask, where are the opportunities for job creation?
Okay, as you know that Kenya has been seen like a Silicon Valley, right? You have seen most of the companies, the technologies are coming from Kenya. You have seen that, right? So it's just an way telling you that there is a lot of opportunities, And let's not also be scared of AI. How can we use AI, right, to help us get our own jobs, right? So I think what's happening here is that we are not paying much attention on how to really focus on creating job environment for the youth. What we are focusing on here is politics. They are campaigning all the time. Nobody paying attention to the policies on how to uplift the youth. And I believe me, these youths are creative. They're entrepreneurs. There is no system supporting entrepreneurship ideas, right? So if we can really invest on that, we can create jobs. What about if your jobs can create 10 jobs? What is the tax break? You see, we have to come with things that can make even the youth to push further. But I don't see that. I think that's a challenge we're facing in Africa.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kennedy Odede, founder and CEO of Shofco. Thank you for your time and your contribution. Nigeria's film industry, Nollywood, is a global powerhouse in volume. Yet for decades, it has battled with distribution challenges, piracy, and low returns for creatives. Now, a number of growing producers are turning to digital platforms to take back control of their work and reach a wider audience. But critics warn the quality of films may be affected. Timothy Obiezu has more from Abuja.
Emmanuel Ayaba joined Nollywood in 2010 with big dreams to become a well-known actor and respected filmmaker. But bureaucratic hurdles and industry red tape made the journey more difficult than expected. Ayaba is part of a growing number of Nigerian filmmakers cutting out expensive and often exploitative traditional marketers, long considered the industry's gatekeepers.
Before now, in the era of VHS, you spend so much to make a film. You give it a marketer. A marketer might do 50,000 copies and tells you that he did 20,000 copies. At the end of the day, it's what he gives to you that you collect. By 1st of July, I'm even premiering one of my movies I shot in Benue at Zemshi. It's a powerful love story, and then we're targeting to make at least 1 million views.
3 years ago, Victory Obialo, a visual storyteller, began his filmmaking journey, choosing to distribute through YouTube from the beginning.
They do well enough to help people in the filmmaking space on YouTube. So you have your Netflix, you have your Amazon Prime, you have maybe Disney Plus and all those streaming platforms. And when you think about the process it takes to get your films on those platforms, can be very strenuous. It can take much longer than you'd expect, much more money than you expect, plus all the criteria you have to meet.
Nollywood produces over 2,500 films every year and is estimated to generate more than $6.4 billion in revenue, according to a 2023 report by the Nigerian Entertainment Conference. But the Nigerian Copyright Commission estimates that over $46 million is lost every year. But Nigerian filmmakers say platforms like YouTube are revolutionizing film distribution, offering wider reach, direct income, and greater control over content. Still, some industry professionals warn that the digital shift could impact production quality.
You really can't expect the level of quality that goes into making cinema films or big movies that go on screen, big screen, for YouTube.
And more Nigerians prefer YouTube over other streaming platforms because it's free, widely accessible, and allows them to control video quality, download videos to watch while offline, and stream using data-saving options. And that's why filmmakers like Ayaba are betting big on digital streaming platforms. Timothy Obiezu, Africa Matters, Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, languages are constantly evolving, but they're also disappearing at an alarming rate. According to UNESCO, over 200 African languages have become extinct in the last 100 years. But in Sierra Leone, schools are determined to back the trend. Suleiman Bari has more from Makeni.
In St. Francis Secondary School in Makeni, students like Yusuf are now studying Temne as part of the curriculum. For him and his classmates, it's more than just a subject, it's a reconnection to their roots.
Learning Temne will help me when I return to my hometown, as I'll be able to communicate with many people who speak the same language. It wouldn't be right to abandon my mother tongue, just because I'm receiving my education in major town. When I go back, I'll be able to hold conversation in Temne. They'll see me as a proud descendant.
In places like these, efforts to keep these languages alive are helping a new generation rediscover their culture.
But English has been the dominant language in Sierra Leone for at least 2 centuries. It's used in government, education, and official events. The country has at least 18 indigenous languages, including 4 main ones, which are Limba, Mende, Temne, and Loko. Teachers are finding it hard to ensure their survival.
You have inadequate teaching and learning materials and the qualified teachers to teach the language itself. So there is a challenge. So you find out that the numbers are going to reduce because some of them, they are thinking that and there is no office for this language.
In major towns, many young people speak Creole and English, but barely understand their ancestral languages. Expat ones without formal teaching, they risk being lost forever.
I think using them in this modern world, we show a clear trace of where we are from, as maybe as an African, specifically as a Sierra Leonean. So I think it will play a clear role if in our university, in school, if they start to teach these basic languages, because the genre is very, very good for me. I think it's a clear pathway if we consider that.
For Sierra Leone, preserving these languages isn't just happening in classrooms. Local traditions also help to keep them alive, empowering the next generation with heritage and belonging. Suleiman Bari, Africa Matters, Makeni, Sierra Leone.
To Kenya next, which, like the rest of the world, is grappling with the effects of climate crisis. But one Kenyan startup is taking steps towards a green future by turning everyday waste into homeware products. Vivian Wandera has the story from the capital, Nairobi.
These Green Thing employees collect thousands of glass bottles from the Dandora landfill every month before crushing and converting them into items like jugs, lampshades, and plates. Founder Nelly Gesari says she wants to help local people understand recycling and upcycling by making everyday objects that everyone uses.
So I wanted to be a thought leader in manufacturing eco-friendly products, but also an impactful climate storyteller who understands truly the value chain of waste in order for me to package the information, but also eco-friendly products.
The company works with the Dandora Women Waste Speakers Group to source the glass from the landfill, which is then delivered to the workshop. Rose Njeri Wanjiru has been working at the Dandora dump site since 1997.
Before we knew Green Thing, we used to sell the green bottles at 1 Kenyan shilling, and the clear bottles were sold at either 2 or 3 Kenyan shilling, depending on how dirty the bottle is. When we met Green Thing, they started buying our bottles at 6 Kenyan shilling, and at the end of every month, they give us a compensation, depending on the effort one has put in through the month.
The waste speakers, who mostly come from low-income families, are paid $23 every month, as well as a fee above the market rate for the bottles they collect. Data from the National Environmental Management Authority shows that Nairobi produces between 3,000 and 4,000 tons of waste daily, and less than 65% of that is collected. Green Thing Kenya is one of 6 companies that work with glass from Dandora, recycling around 70 kilograms a day, depending on demand. But that's not the only problem.
The lack of capital, or capital being inaccessible to business people like me. And not just in form of finance, but also in form of knowledge. It would be nice, for example, to learn from people who've done glass blowing for years and years, because it's not a new technique.
It's easy to spot waste lying around in Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, and it doesn't help that the overflowing Dandora landfill reached capacity 24 years ago. Green Thing Kenya is one of the few companies that are offering climate-friendly solutions to a problem that many say the government has ignored.
Vivian Wandera, Africa Matters, Nairobi.
We head to Eswatini in southern Africa, where subsistence farming is all they know. But frequent droughts, erratic rainfall and prolonged dry spells have been affecting food security. Now, a young fish farmer is showing her village another way to farm. Nokuhanya Musi tells us more.
In landlocked Eswatini, about 1 in 3 people don't know where their next meal will come from. Challenging economic conditions make it hard to buy nutritious meals. But Bongegile, a 30-year-old fish farmer, is trying to change that.
The importance of fish farming as a young woman and mother has empowered me to provide for my children and meet my own needs. It's granted me independence, allowing me to support my family without relying on a man. Additionally, I can share my harvest with the community, ensuring others can benefit as well.
The World Food Programme says chronic malnutrition and stunting affects 26% of children aged under 5, especially in rural Eswatini.
Bongegile's entrepreneurial efforts aren't just about fish farming, but transforming lives by creating opportunities for women, ensuring food security, and strengthening community resilience.
Since the fish farm was introduced here in 2023, the Nyagat community say they are home.
We don't have to travel a long distance to buy fish. We are now able to get something to eat. With the changes in the weather patterns attributed to climate change, there are some crops that we are unable to farm, which gives us a variety of food options. We are used to crop farming, and fish farming was something unheard of.
And hundreds of fish farmers say they lack capital, water resources, and training to expand. But 52-year-old grandfather and local farmer Gacheni says Bongegile's approach challenged him to rethink his farming practices.
When we thought of farming, we always thought of maize, cabbage, spinach, lettuce. That's what I had always known. The sugarcane business also happens to be a lucrative trade in our community. I believe that with the introduction of alternative ways of farming, such as fish farming, it will allow us as farmers to diversify instead of sticking to one thing.
Although fish farming presents a viable solution, few farmers are able to take advantage of it for now. Nogukanya Musi, Africa Matters, Eswatini.
To South Africa now, where the United Nations is warning that the gains made in the fight against the HIV and AIDS pandemic could be reversed. That's because funding cuts have closed prevention and treatment centers, leaving millions of patients at risk. Tuso Kumalo reports from Johannesburg.
More new infections as millions of people lose the battle against HIV and AIDS globally. That's the stark warning that came with the release of the latest report by the United Nations, which shows drastic cuts from donors and the U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw $4.3 billion in funding for HIV programs has triggered a new crisis.
If the world doesn't plug this hole, we estimate that an additional 6 million people will be newly infected in the next 4 years. So we had 1.3 last year, but between now and 2029, we could have another 6 million newly infected, and we could have 4 million additional deaths.
UNAIDS data shows that South Africa has about 7.7 million people living with HIV, the highest number in the world. And its health department says PEPFAR funding that contributed about 17% to its HIV and AIDS program that was used to run HIV counseling and testing campaigns was paused in January.
What we did immediately after PEPFAR pulled out, we sat and looked at the programs and took a decision that no matter what has happened, come what may, people who are on ARVs will continue taking them.
Mbulelo Jasi is one of millions of South Africans living with HIV. He says the funding cuts have left them worried, but they are still soldiering on even though some facilities have closed.
I don't picture myself dying, not this time around, and that's the attitude of people with HIV globally, that this time around governments must also regroup.
But experts say this funding could have a good ending if governments, civil society organizations and communities regroup and strategize by repurposing government funds to prioritize stopping new infections.
With plans now advanced to introduce a long-acting medicine that can prevent HIV infection with a twice-a-year injection and monthly tablets, UNAIDS says the world could be on the verge of a treatment revolution. But for this to materialize, it says, countries must prevent disruption of services, protect supply chains, maintain reach, and deliver quality HIV services. Tuso Kumalo, Africa Matters, Johannesburg, South Africa.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode and leave your comment on our Africa Matters YouTube page or on X. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Grace Korea Kanja.